Joining me now, Democratic Congressman Robert Garcia of California. He's a member of the House Oversight Committee and the Homeland Security Committee. And Andrew Desiderio, senior congressional reporter at Punchbowl News. Thank you both very much for being here. Congressman Garcia, I have to start with you. How did you vote on each of the bills today?
Yeah, look, this is a good day for the United States, for democracy. It's a great day for our allies across the world and for humanitarian aid. I voted yes on the package. I think what's really important is that at this very moment that Putin is defeated in his march toward trying to dominate Eastern Europe and Ukraine, the House did the right thing. It's also really important that we focus on the humanitarian aid package of $9 billion. And that humanitarian aid is not just going, which is desperate, for places like Gaza. We're talking about money that will also be used in Haiti, which is going through a massive, as we know, just chaos and crisis right now. It's going to go to places like the Sudan, where millions have died since the civil war. And so the humanitarian aid package, I think, is one of the key cornerstones of this entire deal. $9 billion, one of the largest in recent memory. So I'm really proud of that. I think the House did the right thing today. And there's a lot of work ahead, but I'm really glad our allies are going to receive the support that they need.
Let me get you on one more thing, Congressman. Why you voted against the TikTok bill? Why?
I voted against that bill because my position on that has been the same. I think that there are other ways of addressing privacy concerns around social media, and we should treat all these platforms equally. And so that's been my position for a long time. It will continue to be. I think that the House obviously is going to move forward. I hope the Senate puts in the right types of measures and protects the millions of Americans across the country that use TikTok for their small business, to promote their brand, to promote their restaurants. And so I'm just concerned about the impact of the local economy across America, and I'm hopeful the Senate will weigh in and make some of those changes.
So, Andrew, President Biden put out a statement praising both parties for coming together at this inflection point. How much of a role did Biden and his administration have in moving Speaker Johnson from Ukraine aid skeptic to being willing to put his speakership on the line to get the foreign aid package passed with Democratic votes, no less?
It's quite the 180. You know, when Mike Johnson was a rank and file member of the House of Representatives, he consistently voted against aid to Ukraine. He was in that group of Freedom Caucus, Republican Study Committee members who were the ideological far right of that conference. And what he's said since is that he's gotten a lot of intelligence briefings, right? Because when you're the Speaker of the House, you're part of what's called the Gang of Eight, right? You get the highest level intelligence briefings possible. And you know, what has been impressed upon him is sort of the gravity of the situation in Ukraine, and not just what's happening in Ukraine, but what could happen beyond Ukraine if Putin is successful in Ukraine. So clearly his views were changed, were influenced as a result of these briefings. And he's also talked personally about the fact that, you know, his son is about to go to the U.S. Naval Academy. And one of the arguments for sending aid to Ukraine is that I'd rather send American bullets than American boys to Europe to defend against Vladimir Putin. And that's exactly what's happening right now, which is that there are no American boots on the ground. There are no Americans dying in this conflict, and that it's a pay now or pay later type of situation. And I think those arguments really moved him. But it is fascinating to see that he really is truly, as you said, putting his job on the line for this issue after having been someone who voted against it consistently.
Okay, so let's talk about the fact that his job is on the line. Congressman Massey says if the Speaker doesn't resign, there will most likely be a vote on the motion to vacate. He has signed on as a co-sponsor to Marjorie Taylor Greene's motion to vacate that she put out last month. She stormed out of the Capitol after this afternoon's vote. When might she make the move to turn her motion to vacate into a privileged motion requiring immediate action?
So the House is going to be on recess for the next week, and what she said today was that she wants this issue to marinate a little bit and for members to get sort of heat from their constituents back in their districts over what happened today in the House of Representatives. So she's still teasing it. She's still hanging this over Mike Johnson's head. I think a lot of this, frankly, has to do with fundraising. You know, by leaving this issue out there and making it something that she can talk about for weeks and weeks and weeks on end, that definitely helps her fundraising numbers and, of course, raise her profile. And she's, you know, she is a powerful member of the House because only of this rule whereby one member can trigger a motion to vacate. So the longer she teases it, the more she's going to get the attention for it. I think that's important here.
Right. And so, Congressman Garcia, the really important question to you is this: will you vote to save the speaker right now? If not, what concessions will you need from him to turn your no into a yes?
The only vote for speaker I'm going to make is for Hakeem Jeffries. And so there's no circumstance where I'm going to support a far right extremist Republican for speaker. Now, I understand that, there might be other considerations that might be made. Other Democrats might feel differently because of the vote. And I understand that. At the end of the day, we are going to get behind our leader. Hakeem Jeffries, I'm sure, is thinking about this question. He is lined up to lead the entire House. That who should be the speaker. It's time, quite frankly, for Mike Johnson just to hand over the gavel to Democrats. I mean, we are the ones that are actually solving the world's problems. We are the ones defending democracy. We are the ones saving the government from a shutdown. And so I think we are leading. We're showing how responsible leadership looks like. And I think that Mike Johnson is going to certainly have some issues in the weeks ahead.
Real quickly, you say that Speaker Johnson should just hand the gavel over to Leader Jeffries. Why do that when y'all are in control of the chamber without even being in the majority?
It sure feels that way sometimes. I mean, there's no question that we have really been, I think, a consequential force, even though we're in the minority this year. And I credit our leadership to that. I credit the president and the president's real bold leadership in leading us as a party. And the Republican Party has been just one big clown show all year. And so it's one crisis to the next, and it's one Marjorie Taylor Greene created crisis to the next. We'll continue to lead. We're ready to get back to work. We have a lot of things that are important to us, and we've got to push through.
Today marks a heart-wrenching anniversary of one of the deadliest school shootings in the United States. It's been 25 years since two students opened fire at Columbine High School in Colorado, fatally shooting 12 classmates and a teacher before turning their weapons on themselves. The infamous massacre sent shockwaves through the nation and became a blueprint for other copycat shootings. And now kids have to practice mass shooter drills at school starting at an early age. But this tragic anniversary is not the only one we're facing. Monday will mark the 6th anniversary of a deadly shooting at a Waffle House in Nashville, Tennessee, where a white man fatally shot 4 people of color, triggering a nearly 34-hour manhunt before his arrest. Joining me now, Dr. Jonathan Metzl, director of the Center for Medicine, Health, and Society at Vanderbilt University, and he's the author of What We've Become: Living and Dying in a Country of Arms. Dr. Metzl, as always, thank you very much for coming to the show. President Biden released a statement today reflecting on the Columbine school shooting anniversary, and he's asking Congress to, quote, do something so that communities won't continue to suffer due to the epidemic of gun violence. This year alone, there have been 19 gun-related deaths at schools. So in your view, what has changed since Columbine, and what still needs to change?
Well, I think it's important to remember that Columbine was kind of a wake-up moment for a particular kind of problem that intersected semi-automatic weapons. It was a shooting that happened in a suburban area. White children were the victims, as well as other people. And so it really brought a question of gun violence home to a lot of people. And I just remember that moment as being like this moment where we're going to turn the course. This is not going to stand. We had come together as a nation. We'd done an assault weapons ban a couple of decades before. We had come together to arrest other kinds of public health emergencies, cigarettes and drunk driving and asbestos. And I think people felt like we've hit bottom, and this is the moment where we come together. I will say that many important things happened after Columbine. It was the beginning of really the modern gun safety movement. So all the groups that we have now, all the remarkable efforts that we have now, but unfortunately, it was very far from the bottom. We've seen many more guns and many more shootings. And in a way, we feel farther away from any kind of resolution, even than we did after that shooting.
And I just want to point out to folks who might be listening on Sirius XM, we just showed pictures of the 12 students and the one teacher who were killed on that day 25 years ago today. But and we're showing the picture again right now. But, you know, Dr. Metzl, your book takes a deep dive into the 2018 Waffle House shooting and how these mass shooters reveal a lot about the issues on race and mental health we continue to face in our country. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, my book, What We've Become, really takes a deep dive into that 2018 Waffle House shooting. It was a shooting where a naked white shooter went into a Waffle House in a part of Nashville where it was 2:30 in the morning, full of young adults of color celebrating after the clubs closed. And it was many things. It was a mentally ill mass shooting. It was a race shooting. It was a sign of what happens in a state like Tennessee with our pathologically loose gun laws. And in many ways, it's the same thing where our town came together and said, enough is enough. We're going to turn course. This has shown us the worst of humanity. Now let's turn course. Now, I want to say there are a lot of people who are building from the horror of that moment, people running for office. The mother of one of the victims of that shooting, Shondell Brooks, is running for state office in Tennessee. So there are many things that come out of the aftermath of horror. But again and again, it was a similar story, which was the people demanded some kind of action. But because Tennessee is a supermajority state, there was no pressure. Nobody was going to get pushed out of office or voted out of office. And so instead, what we've seen is a dramatic expansion in every kind of law that led to the shooting. People can carry guns without permits. Now we're arming teachers, long guns to people with 18 and older. And so we have this total disconnect between what people know we need as a society to keep our country safe and what the political process in its gerrymandered state right now is delivering, which is, unfortunately, more of these horrific mass shootings.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Dr. Metzl, a question occurs to me when we showed a picture of the Waffle House shooter. Was he taken alive after that manhunt?
Yeah, that's kind of the story I tell in the book. Not only was he taken alive, what I show is there were 5 or 6 incidences before the shooting. He tried to jump the fence at the White House. He came to the attention of the FBI. He jumped naked into a pool and then jumped out and shook his gun at people. And so part of the story I ask in the book is, what does it take to disarm a white man in America? That's really the story of the book. And it turns out it's very hard because the laws, the system, people see a white man as a patriot. And yes, he was taken alive after the shooting. He was not killed.
Dr. Jonathan Metzl, as always, thank you very much for coming to the show. Tuesday, the Senate will start to vote on legislation that will send billions of dollars to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. The package, which finally passed in the House yesterday in a rare Saturday session after months of delay and Republican dysfunction, totals more than $95 billion. Even with the delay, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stressed the importance of this action, saying, quote, "Democracy and freedom will always have global significance and will never fail as long as America helps to protect it." And that protection is more important now than ever. This morning on Meet the Press, President Zelensky also issued this warning after he was asked his thoughts on Donald Trump encouraging Russian President Vladimir Putin to invade NATO countries who don't pay defense bills.
I know for sure, if Ukraine fails, then Putin definitely will invade the Baltic countries. Why? Not because there's some interesting idea, strategy, but because Putin wants to return the influence of the Soviet Union. And he really wants to retake, through force, through war, he wants to retake all former Soviet republics and now independent states. Whether they are in the NATO or not, he doesn't care.
Putin wants to return the influence of the Soviet Union. That's a sobering statement. And Zelensky isn't the only one sounding the alarm on threats to democracy from autocrats. In an open letter to President Biden about the changing national security threats for the United States at home and abroad, my next guest warned, quote, "The United States is facing an emerging, increasingly more closely aligned group of authoritarian powers deeply opposed to the U.S.-led, rules-based international order." Joining me now is retired four-star Army General Wesley Clark, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander in Europe. General Clark, great to see you. Thank you for coming to the Sunday show. Your letter goes into some detail about how Russia, in league with China, Iran, and North Korea, are working together to destabilize America's position as a global leader. Talk more about that.
So what you have is these four countries increasingly working together. You have a strategic alliance between China and Russia, between Russia and Iran. You have North Korea feeding its artillery and other armored equipment into Russia. China is supplying the high technology goods for the Russian defense industry. Iran supplying drones. Russia supplying high technology, some air defense and maybe some aircraft into Iran. All of this being pulled together ever more closely. Vladimir Putin even had Hamas leaders come to Moscow. So he's really orchestrating this, and he's got a major offensive going against the U.S. political system at the same time.
And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But General Clark, has the delay in getting the Ukraine funding bill through Congress aided this authoritarian axis you're warning about?
Well, it certainly has. First of all, the Ukrainians have lost a large number of troops. They've lost some critical terrain. And remember, that bill hasn't passed yet, and that assistance is not there. So we would need like a Berlin airlift to fly that stuff directly into Ukraine, heavy equipment, ammunition, and all Patriot missiles, ATACMS, everything that they need needs to be flown in right away. I don't know if we're planning that. And I don't know if it's costed out in that $60 billion. But if that aid takes another couple of months, Vladimir Putin has wide open opportunity to exploit the weakness. Already, we've had groups of Ukrainian soldiers who had to surrender to the Russians because they literally had not a single bullet left to fire.
You stress in your letter that the United States needs to confront nuclear weapons since Putin and his associates have repeatedly threatened nuclear weapons to prevent U.S. and Western assistance to Ukraine. How?
Well, from the beginning, Vladimir Putin has threatened, horrific consequences. We just had the Iranians threaten Israel with basically the same thing the other day. When you say unimaginable consequences and so forth, that's nuclear weapons. And some of Vladimir Putin's lieutenants have been even more explicit in this. So nobody wants a nuclear war, sure. And nobody wants a confrontation, sure. But you can't just keep backing away from this. These countries in Eastern Europe, in the Baltics, Poland, Romania, they know what it feels like to be under the Russian boot heel. And they don't want it again. And they're looking to the United States, and they see us backing away and saying, oh, no confrontation. They're saying, okay, well, yeah, there's a legal treaty, but is the United States really willing to confront Vladimir Putin when he threatens nuclear weapons? What about our nuclear weapons? Why isn't he scared of our nuclear weapons? We need to really think this thing through, because for 30 years, since the Cold War ended, we've sort of been on a glide path. It was comfortable. It was nice. We were the sole superpower. That's a bygone era. We're now under challenge from this group of nations that want to erode our ability to help lead the world. They're willing to use force, and they're willing to rely on the nuclear threat.
Another thing they're willing to do, and you mentioned this a moment ago, is use our own political system against this. You contend that it's become a major, quote, theater of operations. What do you mean?
Absolutely. Because what they have is a whole system of influence operations to try to change the views of the American people and make it difficult for the leaders in our government to formulate cohesive policies. So they do this in a number of ways. They have people who are working with academics. They have people who are on social media networks. They are posing as Americans. They have money coming in through businesses that are co-owned with foreign countries. And there's a lot of ways that they're influencing. But the point is, it's an orchestrated game plan. before there was social media, before there was the internet, of course, the Soviet Union tried to do this. We're a very important country, and it was always the Soviet Union's aim to try to influence American politics, but they weren't any good at it. But social media and the internet has given them what we call multiple attack vectors. They can now reach out individually to American voters and feed them disinformation, feed them information that's 80% correct, 20% is what the Russians want you to believe. So this is the methodology. You say things that sound reasonable. There's a threat on our border, no doubt about it. But how does that compare to the threat to democracy if Ukraine falls?
General Wesley Clark, I want to keep in touch with you because I want to know if you do indeed hear from the president about your memo to the president that dropped on Thursday. General Wesley Clark, thank you very much for coming to the Sunday show. Tomorrow, we will see something none of us has ever seen before, the criminal prosecution of a former American president. For the first time, Donald Trump will face a jury of his peers in a case that could carry prison time. Trump's hush money and election interference trial could be the ultimate test of the rule of law and the nature of accountability in this country. In less than 24 hours, the prosecution and the defense will deliver opening statements in front of 12 members of the jury and 6 alternates, laying out the evidence for and against Trump's guilt. That's in spite of multiple last-ditch efforts by Trump's team to delay the start of this trial. As a reminder, Trump is charged with 34 felony counts of falsifying records. The Manhattan District Attorney accuses Trump of interfering in the 2016 election by disguising payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels to keep quiet her allegation of a past sexual encounter with Trump as legal expenses. Trump has pleaded not guilty and denies any wrongdoing. He says he'll testify in his own defense, and tomorrow, Judge Merchan will decide how he can be cross-examined if he does take the stand. During jury selection last week, an angry and defiant Donald Trump tried making his case to the only cameras allowed, outside the courtroom. Here's a taste of his many hallway press conferences.
It's a case that should have never been brought. It's an assault on America. Legal expense. It's called legal expense. That's what you're supposed to call it. But all of these are stories from legal experts saying how this is not a case. The case is ridiculous. There's another one. The case is ridiculous. The judge has to take off this gag order. It's very, very unfair that my constitutional rights have been taken away.
Prosecutors say Trump has already violated his gag order at least 10 times, including sharing a comment on social media calling jurors, quote, undercover liberal activists. Judge Merchan will weigh in on the gag order Tuesday and could fine Trump for those posts. And that's not the only threat to Trump's finances this week. At a hearing also tomorrow, the New York Attorney General will seek to cancel Trump's $175 million bond in his civil fraud case after questioning whether the company that issued the bond has the money to cover it. If the judge agrees, Trump will have just 7 days to secure a different loan or have some of his assets seized. But looming over all these cases is the Supreme Court, which will finally hear on Thursday oral arguments in Trump's claim of presidential immunity. The question at issue here is a fundamental one. How much can a current or former president get away with that the rest of us can't? Make no mistake, if the high court rules in his favor, it could derail all legal efforts to hold Trump accountable for his actions, alter the rule of law, and change the nature of American democracy. Trump has clearly been a little obsessed about all this, posting online about presidential immunity more than a dozen times this weekend alone. Trump will be stuck in New York during his Supreme Court date, but expect his legal team to bring the crazy even without him. As you may remember, Trump's attorney told a lower court a president can be immune from prosecution even for ordering a murder.
Could a president who ordered SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival who was not impeached, would he be subject to criminal prosecution?
If he were impeached and convicted first. And
so your answer is no.
My answer is qualified yes.
just let that sink in. An argument that would let a president or a former president get away with murder. And if that's an example of what we could hear this week, buckle up. Joining me now, former federal prosecutor Glenn Kirshner. He is an MSNBC legal analyst and host of the Justice Matters podcast. Also with me, Mark Joseph Stern, senior writer for Slate. Glenn, Mark, thank you both very much for being here. Mark, you're here at the table, so I'm going to start with you. You were initially skeptical of the Manhattan District Attorney's case, but you've come around. What's changed your mind about the importance of this trial?
Well, over the past year, I think Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg and his team have made an extraordinarily strong case that this really was a felony offense under New York law, that it wasn't just a misdemeanor involving some kind of low-level record-keeping crime, but that it was tied in fundamentally to federal and state laws involving campaign finance and election interference. That's why District Attorney Bragg has made such an effort over and over again to say this is not just about a porn star or hush money. This is election interference. I think that's a really important point because, we're all watching these cases about 2020 get stuck in the lower courts, not go to trial. This is the first to go forward. There's been a temptation among some cynics to say this one doesn't really matter. It's not a big deal. But the fact that it is fundamentally about honest elections and whether Trump can break all the rules that apply to everyone else, I think that matters, and it really raises the stakes here. I was sort of convinced that this was the right time to bring these charges and that they were the right charges because the district attorney has showed that if Trump is found guilty of these offenses, that he truly did conspire to violate state and federal election laws. That is a serious offense, and he should be held accountable.
All right, Glenn, you are the former federal prosecutor here. Were you also initially skeptical of this case, the Manhattan District Attorney's case?
I was really not all that skeptical, Jonathan. When you see the mountain of evidence, okay, this is coming from a former career prosecutor, I understand, but when you see the mountain of evidence that has been amassed against Donald Trump, when the folks who are suspicious of the sort of quality of the evidence in this case go to things like, well, Michael Cohen was lying. Okay, of course Michael Cohen was lying. In fact, in large part to try to protect Donald Trump and keep him out of hot water. But, it's not the question of whether a witness lied previously that will convince a jury about the strength or weakness of the case. It's whether that witness is telling the truth now and whether the witness is corroborated with things like covert audio recordings of Donald Trump and Michael Cohen conspiring to commit the crime. Check with hard evidence like documents and reimbursement checks that Donald Trump was writing, including out of the Oval Office. Check, you take the weakness of Michael Cohen lying and you turn it into a strength because you talk about his motive for lying, which was to help his former boss. So I am not all that concerned that if the jury follows the evidence and applies the instructions of law as Judge Merchan gives it to them, I am fairly confident they may end up convicting Donald Trump, and they may do it in a New York minute.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Glenn, jurors have already had to worry about their identities being leaked. A couple jurors have already been asked to be removed from the case. Might we see other jurors asked to be dismissed?
I feel like it's almost inevitable that we're going to have other jury bumps along the way here. It's not that unusual, Jonathan. When we pick a jury, we send the jurors home for the night. They come back the next day to begin hearing opening statements. And one or more of the jurors are like, you know what, Judge, I came up with some reasons, some concerns, and I might not be able to sit. That happens all the time. And then, early on in the process, the judge, if those reasons are valid, can dismiss that juror and replace that juror with an alternate. I have a lingering concern, Jonathan, that because there are only 6 alternates seated, if we have an unusually high number of jurors who feel like they want to get off the jury, maybe, they're feeling uncomfortable, maybe they've been gotten to, I've had that happen over the years. I hope 6 is enough, and I trust 6 will be enough.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Mark, Maggie Haberman in the New York Times, and I'm quoting here, she writes, people close to Trump are anxious about how he will handle having so little to do as he sits there for weeks on end. It has been decades since he has had to spend so much time in the immediate vicinity of anyone who is not part of his family, his staff, or his throng of admirers? What kind of impression do you think Trump is making so far with the jury?
I think Trump has made a poor impression with potential jurors so far. Based on reports from inside the courtroom, we know that he has looked hostile, sometimes even aggressive, as jurors have paraded before him, saying their true feelings about the former president. This is Manhattan. Many of those feelings are far from positive. A lot of these potential jurors have criticized him, said things to his face that he probably has not heard in person for many years since he's so insulated from these criticisms. Jurors pick up on that. They pick up on body language. They pick up on muttering. They take it often as a sign of untrustworthiness, that the defendant might have something to hide. And it's not going to play well for him once this actually goes to trial this coming week.
Hey, Glenn, what do you expect at Trump's Supreme Court hearing on immunity this week?
So, Jonathan, I'm not so concerned that the Supreme Court is going to say a president can commit any and all crimes against the people of the United States in violation of the federal laws and do so with complete impunity and immunity from prosecution. I have a greater concern that they're going to be so interested in what they call outer perimeter immunity, which is not a thing in the criminal law, but it is a thing in the civil law. And, you know, they may conclude that, well, if there are some outer perimeter crimes the president commits, maybe he should have immunity for that. And the only way we will know whether any of what Donald Trump did should enjoy outer perimeter immunity is to send it back to Judge Chutkan to hold all kinds of evidentiary hearings on whether some of what he did might enjoy some outer perimeter protection. Then it can come back to the Supreme Court. Then we can definitively resolve the case. The reason I am concerned about that is it will eat up so much time. Donald Trump may not be tried until, who knows, 2026.
Hey everyone, MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.